The grand chamber of the Galactic Council hummed with the soft energy of thousands of minds, each one a node in the intricate web of power that governed the galaxy. In the center of the room, a massive table sprawled across the floor, its surface a reflective black material that shimmered beneath the light. Around it, representatives of the galaxy's most powerful species convened, each one a beacon of their respective empires. At the far end of the table, Varex Erutaz, the Council's most senior member, towered over the others. His elongated, sleek frame gleamed in the soft light, his sharp, cold eyes never leaving the holographic display in front of him. The Human Confederation's rise in influence had become the topic of heated debate. His lip curled as he scoffed at the notion of a species so young and unpredictable posing any true threat to the established order. Humanity, Varex's voice echoed through the chamber, dripping with disdain. A mere handful of decades ago, they were nothing more than a blip in our radar. Now, they're a threat? Please. Let's not waste time with such trivialities. He glanced around the room, noting the subtle nods of agreement from the other council members. His words were law, and humanity's recent rise was still regarded as a passing anomaly in the grand scheme of galactic politics. Eli Sable, humanity's representative, would be here soon, but Varex didn't expect much from the captain. The mere thought of a human commander leading their fleet against an empire like his own was laughable. You all need to understand, Varex continued, the human tendency for rashness will only harm them. They will be their own undoing. An alien from the Shaura system, a reptilian creature named Lee Thor, raised a clawed hand, his voice low and hissing. Indeed. Their fleets are formidable, but they are still reckless children, lacking the discipline to match the true power of the galactic legacy. The room erupted in murmurs of agreement. They were all in agreement, humanity was too impulsive, too new to be a real challenge. The Confederation's rapid growth wasn't a result of superior tactics or brilliant leadership, but pure luck, they said. And while their military was impressive, it lacked the cohesion and centuries of experience that the galactic empires had cultivated. As the debate raged on, Captain Elijah Sable sat in his quarters aboard the Defiance, alone. His fingers danced over a holographic map, the soft glow of the display illuminating his face. The ship was parked in orbit around a barren moon, waiting for the signal to proceed. He didn't hear the mocking echoes of the Galactic Council's meeting, nor did he care for their insults. He knew what they thought, he had heard it all before. Reckless children, he muttered to himself, a smile tugging at his lips. If only they knew what we've got planned. Eli's mind raced as he plotted their next move. His reputation among the council was one of a brash tactician, someone who had pulled off impossible victories using daring strategies. But he wasn't just a military man, he was a symbol of everything they feared. Humanity was unpredictable, wild, and they had learned to fight in ways the established empires couldn't fathom. It wasn't enough to just win battles, Eli needed to change the game entirely. Suddenly, a sharp chime echoed through the room. Eli stood, taking a deep breath before pulling his uniform tight. It was time. The council wanted to see him. And he was ready to show them just how wrong they were. The doors to the council chamber slid open, and Eli stepped through. The members of the Galactic Council fell silent as he entered, his posture confident, his eyes scanning the room. He could feel their eyes on him, some curious, others judgmental, but he didn't flinch. In the heart of their empire, a human was about to make his mark. Eli stood tall, his hands behind his back, as he faced the council. Varex Erutaz was at the head of the table, his icy gaze fixated on the human. Eli met his stare, unblinking. Captain Sable, Varex began, his voice oozing with arrogance, it seems we have a great deal to discuss. Your people's expansion, your supposed military prowess, it's all rather quaint, wouldn't you say? Do you really believe that you stand a chance against the established powers of the galaxy? Against us? Eli's lips curled into a smile, his voice steady as he replied. I don't think we're challenging you, Varex. At least, not in the way you think. A ripple of confusion passed through the room, and Eli felt the thrill of the moment. He wasn't just here to negotiate, He was here to make them realize how badly they'd underestimated humanity. What do you mean? Varex's voice was laced with skepticism, though his curiosity was evident. Eli took a slow step forward, his eyes scanning the faces of the other council members. You think we're here for the scraps, to play politics and diplomacy like the rest of you? You think we're here to expand into your territory, to challenge your fleets and your authority? He shook his head. But no. You've misunderstood. Varex narrowed his eyes, leaning forward. Then what is it you want, human? Your people are growing faster than you can manage. You're making enemies at every turn. You're spreading like wildfire. What is your endgame? Eli's smile grew wider, his tone unwavering. I'm not here to take your territory. I'm here to take your power. A stunned silence blanketed the room. Varex's eyes flickered with a mix of anger and confusion. You're mad. No, Eli replied coolly. I'm just getting started. Eli turned and walked out of the chamber, leaving the council to stew in their shock. He didn't need to explain further. Let them think he was crazy. Let them underestimate him. The game had only just begun. Back aboard the Defiance, Eli stared out into the vast expanse of space, the stars twinkling like distant memories. He knew the road ahead would be difficult, that there would be moments of doubt, but for the first time in a long while, he felt certain of his path. The Council had mocked humanity's aim. Now, they would learn that humanity's true target wasn't what they had imagined. It was them. The Defiance drifted through the cold void of space, its sleek hull reflecting the light of distant stars. Captain Eli Sable stood at the ship's command center, watching the holographic map that glowed before him. The map, once a simple projection of the galaxy, now displayed the intricate paths of the human Confederation's fleets, each position, each potential enemy, laid out with precision. His fingers hovered over the controls, adjusting coordinates as his mind ran through calculations. There was no turning back. We're all set, Captain. Lieutenant Arya Valen, his communications officer, reported from her station beside him. Her tone was calm, but Eli could sense the undercurrent of anticipation in her voice. All systems are operational, and the crew is ready. Eli nodded, his gaze still fixed on the map. His mind wasn't just calculating their next move, he was planning something far more ambitious. The Galactic Council had dismissed humanity's rise as a fluke, but now they would realize their mistake. He wasn't here to fight small battles. He was aiming for something much bigger. We're ready, Eli muttered under his breath. Let's see how they react when they realize we're not playing by their rules. Inside the vast, ornate halls of the Galactic Council's headquarters, the members convened once more. The atmosphere was tense, charged with uncertainty. Varex Erutaz sat at the head of the table, his reptilian fingers drumming lightly against the cold surface. Despite his outward calm, his mind was racing. The human captain's words from their last meeting still echoed in his thoughts. Eli Sable had said he wasn't here to take their territory. He was after their power. Varex had dismissed the threat at first. But now, doubt began to creep into his mind. The Confederation's rapid expansion, their technological advances, and their sheer unpredictability had begun to gnaw at him. Perhaps the humans weren't just a fleeting annoyance after all. Shall we begin? Varex's voice cut through the murmur of conversation, drawing the attention of the other council members. They were all present now, those who wielded power across the stars, each one with their own agenda, their own designs for the galaxy. Lee Thor, the Shaura representative, leaned forward, his bright yellow eyes narrowing. The human fleets are becoming bolder, he said, his voice gravelly. We need to move swiftly before they gain more ground. Their ships are advancing through our borders. Varex waved a hand dismissively. Let them make their move. They can't sustain this momentum forever. We'll respond when the time comes. The humans are out of their depth. But even as he spoke, a faint unease gnawed at him. The Defiance had been moving through the galaxy undetected, and no one had quite figured out what the humans were up to. Varex leaned back in his chair, his thoughts turning to Eli Sable. Something about the human's confidence unsettled him. Back aboard the Defiance, Eli gathered his senior staff for a briefing. The room was dim, with only the light from the holographic projection casting shadows on the walls. His crew, tough, experienced, and loyal, stood in attention as he spoke. "All right, here's the situation," Eli began, his voice sharp and direct. "We've made our move. The first phase of the mission is already in motion, but there's a lot more at stake here than just breaking through the Council's defenses." He looked each of them in the eye, making sure they understood the gravity of their mission. "What we're doing here isn't just a simple military operation. We're going to send a message that we're not just another empire to deal with. We're here to reshape the balance of power." Lieutenant Vallon raised an eyebrow. "Are you saying we're targeting the Council itself?" Eli smiled, a sly, confident grin. "Exactly. The Defiance will breach their communications network first. We'll take control of their system, turn their own information against them. And once they realize we're serious, they won't know where to turn." A murmur of agreement passed through the crew. They knew Eli, knew his tactics were bold, even reckless at times. But they also knew he never failed. Not once. And this mission, though high stakes, wasn't going to be the one time he did. Ensign Layla Darris, the ship's engineer, spoke up from the back of the room. "What's the next move, Captain? If we disable their communications, we'll be in their blind spot. What if they retaliate?" Eli glanced at her, the grin never leaving his face. "Then we fight. And we win." The room fell into silence for a moment before the tension broke with a shared, quiet chuckle. Eli's crew knew better than anyone that the man's faith in his plan, and in them, was unshakable. The first phase of the operation kicked off quietly, almost without a sound. The Defiance slipped through the galaxy like a ghost, using a combination of stealth tech and calculated jumps to avoid detection. Their target, the heart of the Council's communication network, a sprawling satellite array that relayed information to every faction in the galaxy. Inside the ship's command center, Eli watched as the crew worked in harmony. Aria Vallon's fingers danced across her console, monitoring incoming signals and tracking the positions of enemy ships. Lieutenant Darris monitored the ship's systems, ensuring they remained in the shadows while their hacking team worked on gaining control of the satellite array. The countdown clock on the screen ticked down. Every second felt like an eternity. "Almost there," Darris murmured, her voice tense. A sharp chime echoed through the room. "We're in," Arya said. "Their systems are ours now." Eli stood up, his eyes cold and focused. "Now we make them see what happens when they underestimate humanity." Back at the Galactic Council's headquarters, the calm atmosphere had been shattered. A sudden disruption in the communication network sent shockwaves through the room. Varex slammed his fist onto the table, his sharp claws digging into the surface. "What is this?" he snarled. Lee Thor hissed in frustration. "The humans, they've infiltrated our systems. It's a full breach." Panic spread like wildfire as members scrambled to secure their communications. But it was too late. Eli Sable had anticipated their every move. The Council's once unshakable confidence was crumbling, and Varex knew, deep down, that this was only the beginning. The humans were no longer just an annoyance, they were a force to be reckoned with. And Eli Sable wasn't finished yet. Back aboard the Defiance, Eli watched the unfolding chaos with quiet satisfaction. "Phase 1 complete," he muttered. "Now for the next step." The galaxy had just begun to realize what humanity was capable of, and they were about to learn just how far they were willing to go. The silence aboard the Defiance was a strange one. It wasn't the quiet after battle, nor the peaceful calm of a successful mission, it was a hushed, anticipatory stillness. Captain Eli Sable stood at the helm, watching the steady glow of the stars pass by. His crew moved like shadows, their usual banter absent as they prepared for the next phase. He could feel the tension in the air. They all knew what was at stake. Eli's fingers brushed over the holographic map once more. The human fleet had already secured the first step, taking control of the Galactic Council's communication network. It had been almost too easy, a perfect execution of his plan. But now, with the full weight of the Galactic Council bearing down on them, the real challenge began. Their next move would either shift the balance of power or seal humanity's fate. Captain, Lieutenant Arya Valin's voice crackled over the comms, pulling Eli from his thoughts. We've intercepted a transmission from the Council. They've deployed reinforcements. It looks like they're planning a counterstrike. Eli nodded, unfazed. Of course they are. They've finally realized we're not just here for a scrap. Get me a full report on their positions. As Arya worked, Eli glanced over at his crew. They were all there, eyes trained on their stations, awaiting his next order. Lieutenant Derris, the ship's engineer, was running diagnostics on the ship's systems. Ensign Layla Derris, the tactical officer, was studying the map, already calculating the potential outcomes of the enemy's movement. She was good, damn good. But Eli's mind was focused elsewhere. You're sure we can't be detected? He asked, turning to Layla. She looked up from her screen. I've adjusted the stealth protocols. We're operating below their detection threshold. But once we strike, we'll be exposed. The question is, will it be enough to keep them from retaliating? Eli's eyes narrowed. They'll retaliate. That's a given. But the question is how far they'll go before they realize it's too late. He clenched his fist, a silent resolve settling over him. We need to make sure that by the time they figure it out, they're already on the defensive. The seconds felt like hours as the crew prepared for the next phase. Eli felt the weight of the moment settle on his shoulders. This was no longer just about proving a point to the Galactic Council. This was about securing humanity's future. If they failed here, the Confederation would be crushed under the weight of the empires that had dominated the galaxy for centuries. Captain, Arya's voice interrupted his thoughts again. I've got their fleet positions. They're clustering around their command center, waiting for our next move. Eli turned sharply. Good. Prepare the fleet for a full strike. I want to hit them hard, hit them fast, and leave them with no time to react. We're not giving them a chance to regroup. The Defiance and its fleet moved in silence through the stars, each ship cloaked under the same stealth protocols that had kept them hidden so far. The Council's forces were oblivious, their attention focused on the breach in their communication network. But Eli knew that wouldn't last long. The moment the first ship came into view, all hell would break loose. Eli stood at the command center, his mind running through the attack sequence once more. It had to be flawless. A single misstep, and they would be overwhelmed by the Council's overwhelming numbers. All ships are in position, Arya reported. Ready to engage on your command, Captain. Eli nodded, his voice steady. Engage. The battle began in an instant. The Defiance and its fleet emerged from the shadows, weapons charging. The first wave of fire from the Council's fleet was already on its way, but the humans were faster. The Defiance's sleek hull dodged the incoming shots with ease, returning fire with deadly accuracy. Every shot that hit its target brought them closer to their goal, destabilizing the Council's control over the galaxy. Captain, we've got incoming ships from the flank. Layla shouted over the comms, her voice tight with focus. Eli barely flinched. Adapt. Get us out of there. We're not staying in one place long enough for them to get a clear shot. The Defiance surged forward, its engines roaring to life as it darted through the chaos. The enemy fleet was larger, more experienced, but it was also predictable. They expected the humans to fight with brute force, to match them head-on. But that was where they'd made their fatal error. Humans didn't fight like the other empires. They adapted, they changed, they struck when their enemies least expected it. We've lost 2 ships in the initial wave, Arya reported, her voice strained but calm. The Council isn't giving up easily. Eli gritted his teeth. We're not giving up, either. Tell the fleet to fall back into position. We hit them again. On the Council's flagship, Varex Erutaz stood, his hand clenched tightly around the armrest of his chair. The reports were coming in fast, each one more damning than the last. The humans were relentless, their fleet weaving through their defenses like water through a sieve. It wasn't supposed to be like this. How is this possible? Varex growled, his eyes scanning the holographic display of the battle. Captain Sable's tactics, they are unpredictable, one of his officers stammered. We can't get a clear read on them. Every time we think we've got them cornered, they slip away. Varex's mind raced. He had underestimated the humans. He had mocked their approach, dismissing them as little more than an irritant. But now, as his ships fell one by one, he realized just how wrong he had been. Captain Sable wasn't fighting like a conventional commander. He was playing a game of attrition, pushing them to their limits without giving them a chance to retaliate. Send out a distress signal, Varex ordered, his voice cold. We need reinforcements. Now. Back aboard the Defiance, Eli watched as the Council's fleet staggered, their lines faltering. They were panicking now, reacting instead of controlling the situation. The tide was turning. But Eli knew this wasn't the end, not by a long shot. The reinforcements would come, and when they did, the battle would only escalate. Captain, Layla called out, her voice cutting through the tension. We've got a new wave coming in. They are bringing everything they've got. Eli's lips twisted into a grin. Good. Let them come. We're not running. We're not hiding. We're showing them exactly what happens when they push humanity to the brink. The Council had made one fatal mistake. They had underestimated the resolve of humanity. And now, they would pay the price. The balance of power was shifting, and the Galactic Council was about to realize that it wasn't their empire that held the true power. It was humanity. Prepare for the next phase, Eli commanded, his voice calm but resolute. Let's finish this. The Defiance surged forward, ready to face the coming storm. The true test of humanity's resolve had only just begun. The stars outside the Defiance's observation deck seemed to be little more than distant flickers now, their once imposing brilliance dimmed in comparison to the firestorm raging just beyond. Eli Sable stood before the panoramic window, watching as his fleet fought tooth and nail against the forces of the Galactic Council. Every movement of their ships, every tactical shift, was calculated with one goal in mind: destabilize the enemy, cripple their ability to react, and create a path to victory. But that wasn't the endgame. Not yet. Captain, Arya Valen's voice came through his earpiece. We've got their command fleet in sight. They are pulling back from the outer lines, but they've reinforced the center. They are preparing for the final stand. Eli didn't flinch. He had expected this. The Council would never give up without a fight, but that's exactly what he wanted them to do. The more they focused on their defense, the more they would miss what was coming for them. Prepare the fleet for the final phase, Eli said, his voice a cold whisper of command. It's time. The Defiance shook with the first tremor of the incoming barrage. Despite the chaos of battle, the crew worked in silence, driven by a singular purpose. Eli had placed his trust in them, and they were proving him right with every decision. The Council's military might was impressive, but the humans had one thing the empires had long lost: the willingness to sacrifice everything for their future. On the flagship of the Galactic Council, Varex Erutaz paced in front of the war table, his claws clicking on the metallic floor. His eyes never left the readouts as he observed the progress of the battle. The humans were relentless, and their unconventional tactics were proving difficult to counter. His fleet, once a symbol of dominance, was now on the brink of collapse. Even though reinforcements were arriving, Varex knew it would be too late. Are we ready to deploy the reserve fleet? Varex growled, not breaking his gaze from the holographic displays. We are, but, his officer hesitated, eyeing the information in front of him. The Defiance has moved into position. They've disabled our long-range scanners. It's like they know every move we make before we make it. Of course they do, Varex snapped, his voice tinged with frustration. We're being played like a card in their hand. The officer spoke again, his voice more cautious now. Captain, it's possible they are not just trying to win the battle. They've already crippled our communications, and now they are targeting our command center. If they succeed, we'll lose everything. Varex stared at the officer in disbelief. Are you suggesting they're after our central command? I'm not suggesting it, Captain. I'm certain of it, the officer replied. They're moving fast, and they're cutting off every escape route. The humans aren't just here to defeat us. They're here to destroy the heart of our power. Back on the Defiance, Eli stood at the command center, his eyes narrowed as he watched the battle unfold. The stage was set. The Council had finally fallen into his trap. As their fleet scrambled to hold onto what little ground they had left, their attention was focused entirely on the Defiance's tactical movements. But Eli wasn't after another victory in space. He was after something more. Captain, we've breached their final line of defense, Layla Derris called out from the tactical station. We're entering their command center's range. Eli smiled, the tension in his shoulders easing for just a moment. Good. Prepare the infiltrators. We're going in. The command center of the Galactic Council was a marvel of technology. Rows of consoles and displays lined the walls, each one linked to a vast network of data systems. It was the beating heart of the Council's empire, where every decision, every order, was made. The fate of the galaxy itself rested within its walls. And it was about to fall. Eli stood in the shadows as the first wave of infiltrators, a specialized team of human soldiers and engineers, moved through the corridors of the command center. Their mission was simple: disable the control systems, erase all data, and sever the connection between the Council's fleet and their heart of power. Once that was done, there would be no way for the Council to react. Move fast, Eli ordered through his comms, his voice low and steady. The longer we stay, the more chance they have to counter us. His team moved with surgical precision, cutting through the security measures and making their way toward the central core. As they worked, the sounds of battle outside grew louder, the vibrations shaking the very walls. The Council's defenses were crumbling, and now they were running out of time. Varex stood at the center of the war room, his anger simmering just below the surface. He could hear the commotion outside, the roar of ships as they fought to maintain their position. His people, once proud and invincible, were now being pushed back at every turn. He had underestimated the humans. Worse, they had already infiltrated their command center. The moment the Defiance had breached the final line, Varex had known that it was over. "Sir, the human forces have reached the control room," one of his officers reported, voice shaking. "They are inside." "How?" Varex's fury flared, his tail snapping violently behind him. "How did they know exactly where to strike?" His officer's voice faltered. "They must have anticipated our movements. They've..." He stopped, eyes widening as a sudden realization hit him. "Captain, the system's data is gone. They've erased everything." On the Defiance, Eli stood at the helm, watching the final stages of his plan unfold. The data had been erased, and the Council's connection to the rest of the galaxy was severed. It wasn't just a victory, it was a statement. The heart of the Galactic Council had been ripped out, and there was no way to replace it. "Mission complete," Layla reported, her voice tinged with disbelief. "The control center is offline. They are blind." Eli's gaze didn't waver. "Now we finish what we started. All ships, target the remaining Council fleet. Leave no trace of their power behind." As the last of the Council's reinforcements were wiped from the stars, Varex stood alone in the war room, staring at the empty screens. The communications were dead. The central command was gone. His empire, his people, were broken. We've lost," he whispered, his voice hollow with the realization. The Galactic Council was no longer the force it had once been. In a single, decisive strike, humanity had shown them that the galaxy was no longer theirs to control. Outside, the battle had ended. The Defiance drifted through the debris of the battle, a lone ship amidst the wreckage of an empire. Eli Sable stood on the bridge, watching the stars once more. He had made his mark. Humanity had made its mark. And the galaxy would never be the same again.